Hello, I'm Susan St. Maur, and here with me today I have Alex Manners, who is a very talented young man who also has Asperger's syndrome. Now, Alex, tell me, what is your background? What makes you such a wonderful Asperger's champion?
Well, I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was 10 years old, and from that moment forward, I've always viewed it as something that I feel privileged and lucky to have. And when I left secondary school, my dad gave me loads of files about all the different problems I'd had throughout my years at school, and I thought I need to tell this story to people and show other people that, yes, there are challenges and struggles with having Asperger's and what I've got specifically, well, Asperger's, but there are also, I look upon it as something positive, and there are many positive elements of it. So I've spoke a number of different times on the radio and written loads of articles about my Asperger's because I want to share my story and help other people and show them that, there are other people like them going through similar challenges that they are.
Yes, well, that's what's so amazing about you is that you are so keen to help other people in the same boat. And one particularly interesting element of that is what you're doing to raise awareness of autism within the football community. What exactly have you been doing with that?
So I go to football matches every week. I've been going since I was about 10 years old. And I've noticed that a lot of people with autism have a lot of struggles and challenges at matches through the close proximity of the seats, going through turnstiles, the sounds, the smells. A match can be overwhelming. So I decided that I would start my own autism and football campaign to raise awareness for actually, what it's like for autistic people at matches and hopefully to make their experiences better. So I've worked with a number of different football clubs, including my local football club in Solihull Moors. And I've visited a number of different clubs where they've got sensory rooms for people with autism, just to try and build up my understanding and awareness of actually what these sensory rooms involve.
Before we go any further, for the benefit of people who don't understand these sensory issues surrounding autism, what actually happens if somebody with autism is just out there in the crowd in the normal way at a football match, or what can happen?
So, first of all, there's the close proximity of the seats, because people with autism tend to like their personal space, so being too close can be an issue. But also, it's the sounds, the smells, the noises, and it's also the unpredictability of you don't actually know what's going to happen during a match. So if someone scores a goal, you can't decide when that goal is going to come, and then suddenly the crowd go up and start cheering, and that can be overwhelming for someone with autism. So there are a number of different things, that can cause someone with autism at a match to experience what we would say sensory overload.
Yeah, and what do you think football clubs need to do? Do they need to invest a lot of money into providing the right sort of space for autistic people?
I think if a certain football club has the facilities, the money, the resources to put in, a more permanent structure like a sensory room, then that's fantastic. But a lot of clubs won't have the space or the money to do that. But there's so many things that they can do that are really not going to cost them anything, really. Even just as simple as training all their stewards in the ground to recognise autistic conditions and things that people struggle with. Even if certain parts of the ground are not really sold out very much, maybe the people with autism could sit in those spaces where, maybe they've got one or two seats either side of them free. So there's lots of different things that can be done that really won't cost the club any much money at all.
Yeah, and is there, are autistic people fond of football? Are there a lot of autistic football fans?
Yes, there are a number of, I know lots of fans of football with autism, and especially for me, football's been it's helped me to cope with a lot of my problems with autism so much. It's given me another focus in life. Instead of focusing on all my challenges, I can escape into this football world. And there are a lot of people with autism that not only support and go and watch football, but play football. And as it's a hidden disability, you won't necessarily be able to tell if someone's got autism. So people, there are probably loads of people that I've sat next to at matches or seen at matches that do have autism, but I won't have known they had autism. But yes, there there will be a number of people with autism, and it's brilliant that some clubs are starting to put things in place.
And so other clubs, if you're listening, take heed, because this obviously is something that's going to provide a lot of pleasure to autistic football fans. Now, Alex, you have a book out at the moment called That's Not Right, My Life Living with Asperger's. Why That's Not Right?
Well, we decided on the title for That's Not Right because when I was younger, my dad always remembers that I would constantly be saying, that's not right, about a number of different things. Like, it might be the fact that we had to walk up a hill to school. That's not right. Why should there be hills? Or we went to a hotel and, we got the wrong meals and things. That's not right. They should have served us the right meal. So everything was not right to me. And at that stage, we didn't know. I wasn't diagnosed with autism, probably when I was 7 or 8. But looking back, my parents can realise that that was probably the first signs that I probably did have, Asperger's.
Yes, that's and how long after that were you actually diagnosed?
So that was when I used to say that's not right all the time. It was probably when I was 7 or 8, and I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was 10, so about 2 years after.
Well, the book is a lovely example of somebody's story and how you have been able to overcome adversity and turn a lot of what some people would think is unfortunate into something fortunate. But there are more serious aspects to the book as well, one of which is the education system in this country. Now, how did you feel about that when you were going through school?
So when I was going through school, a lot of the problems and the challenges that I was having were things to do with like homework, school uniform, teachers not understanding my autism, not treating me in the right way. And my mum, my dad specifically and my mum, they did a lot of fighting to try and get me the support that I needed. And it was only because, for instance, my dad was such a strong person and could stand up to what was correct and what I needed, that I managed to get all the help and support that I did. Realistically, he shouldn't have had to do that because, for instance, it was written into my statement that I was allowed to have a certain length of time each day where I'd get extra support. And I rarely got that support. But at the age I probably was, probably only 10 or 11, I'd never really read my statement. And if I had done, I wouldn't have understood it. So I didn't know that I was entitled to all this extra support. So I would never really go home and tell my dad, I haven't had, the hour of support I'm meant to have. I've only had 10 minutes because I really didn't know. But yeah, my dad had to do so much fighting. And it was only when I left sixth form and he showed me all these files that he'd got of all the different problems I'd had and things he'd had to fight for me to get the support I needed, that I realised the amount of things that had actually gone on throughout my time at school.
That's amazing. Tell me, though, do you think that in the intervening 12, 14 years since you were at school, that things have improved?
I think throughout the school systems, when I went to school, there weren't really that many places suitable for me to go to because a normal big state school would have been probably too big for me. And then, but nowadays, to be honest, it's probably still the same where there's probably not that many places available for people with autism to go to. And I think I was lucky because there was a school that had a lot of help and support for people with autism and Asperger's that I could go to. But it's all about where you live, I think, because if you live in somewhere where there isn't a school, then you haven't really got an option to go to a specialist school, and you might have to travel a long distance to school. But in terms of my own personal health and well-being, I've managed to overcome a lot of the challenges that I've had. So a lot of the meltdowns I used to have, for instance, I can now recognise when a meltdown is coming on. I get a lot less stressed over things, and I can I've found ways of coping with a lot of the challenges that my autism brings, because the challenges are still there and they're never really going to go away. It's just I've become better at managing them.
Yes. I've heard that it's a bit of a postcode lottery, not only in the way you describe, but in the level to which special educational needs coordinators, or SENCOs, as I believe they're called, are trained or not trained. Am I right in thinking that the training is a bit patchy?
Well, from my own personal experiences, I've had some absolutely wonderful Senkos at my schools who, you know, they really understood autism so well, and they helped me tremendously throughout the years that they were with me. But then I've also had experiences where teachers just don't understand, and Senkos just don't understand autism at all. And maybe the Senkos get training or don't get training, but I think the bigger problem is that it's not just the Senko that's working with these children who have Asperger's. It's all the teachers within the school. And a lot of them won't have got any training. The vast majority probably won't have had any training whatsoever to do with autism and what autism is. And a lot of them, in my opinion, have preconceived ideas of, oh, autistic people are this, this, and this. And because, for instance, for me, I don't fit into a lot of those categories of someone with autism and Asperger's, they think, oh, well, why should we treat him any differently? Again, there's been wonderful teachers that I've worked with that really did understand me and my Asperger's, but also there's been lots of teachers that didn't understand me and my Asperger's. And I guess what, in my own personal experiences, it's just the luck of the draw of which teachers you actually end up working with.
Yes, and that's something that shouldn't happen. Excuse me. What do you think could be done about it within the education system, particularly bearing in mind that there are an increasing number of children and young people now being diagnosed with Asperger's and, high functioning and otherwise types of autism?
Well, I think the first and foremost thing the first thing that any school should do, and anyone who's going into teaching, is to just you don't necessarily need to be professors on autism and Asperger's, but just to have that understanding that, you know, if you do have someone in your class, say, who has Asperger's, just to be sympathetic towards them. You know, for me, if I was allowed to read my football program for 5 minutes, it would really help, and I'd be able to function in the lesson. And it's just things like that, you know, allowing people with autism to do that. I think also there needs to, in a general sense, be more autism training. And I think the best way to do that is actually someone like myself who's lived with autism and experienced these problems, to go in and actually, you know, talk to the teachers and explain to them that autism and Asperger's is not one thing. It's such a big scale that one person who has trouble with certain things might be completely different to someone else who's got autism. They have trouble with other things. You know, a lot of teachers probably believe that people with autism can't look you in the eye, whereas because I can, they're probably thinking, well, I can't recognise that Alex has autism. And also I think it would be brilliant if, like, each school or a lot more schools had, you know, a certain section within the school, a smaller, maybe one class that was a lot smaller, or one class where there was extra teachers and extra support, where, you know, and having, for me, and having somewhere like a teacher and somewhere within school that you can go if you are stressed or having problems, so you're not left to the wider sort of school community.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, they all seem like very doable things that aren't going to cost a fortune. How are these things financed when you have children in a school with this type of special need?
So, again, going by my own personal experiences, I was funded by the council, who sent me to this private school locally to where I live, private independent school, and they funded a taxi to get me there every single day. So I wasn't having the stress of having to go by the school, you know, by the bus or the train, where it's unpredictable of who's going to be on the train, who's going to be on the bus, whether they're going to be late or not. So that was absolutely fantastic. And again, the extra support I got, a lot of it was funded by my local council. So a lot of the things that are put in place for children with autism are funded by their local council within the area that those children are going to school. Yeah, and that's how. But although these schools are being funded with all this money, if they've got a certain number of students with autism in the school, they're being funded for those students. Sometimes you wonder what the money's actually being used for.
Yes, that's a very good question. Now, changing the subject slightly, you do a lot of other things besides what we've just been talking about, including your own radio show. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, so I present a children's radio show every Sunday morning on my local radio station called Solihull Radio. So I present the Solihull Radio Children's Show. And it's absolutely fantastic because children's television is one of my passions in life, and it's been one of the ways that I can recover and calm down from when I'm having a meltdown. So when I'm really stressed and having a meltdown, if a children's show like CBeebies comes on the television, it's almost as if the stress completely goes within an instant and I become glued to whatever show is on the TV, the children's show is on the TV. And presenting my children's show every week is really, really enjoyable, because one of my ambitions is to become a TV presenter, possibly a children's presenter, on CBeebies. And I always say to people, I wouldn't have got, and I wouldn't be a presenter on Solihull Radio if I didn't have Asperger's.
Yes, that's true. And it's wonderful that you have been able to create that. You have your own children's stories as well that you write.
Yes, so I've created my own children's stories called Rainbow Man, where he visits different attractions within our local area. And, one of my ambitions is to be a children's TV presenter and to create, children's books and children's shows. So at the moment, these Rainbow Man stories I read out every week on my children's radio show, but maybe in the future they could be TV shows that are on CBeebies or something, because I originally wrote them for TV, and they actually got reviewed. They were reviewed a few years back by CBeebies. So hopefully one day I can have my own sort of children's shows on the television.
But you've already been on television a few times, haven't you? What sort of thing have you done?
Yeah, so I've been interviewed a number of times on the TV, but I've also recently just been on a show called The Undateables, which was absolutely fantastic.
Tell us more. What happened, and are you in love?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that, yes, I did meet a wonderful lady, and that was actually the last thing that they filmed, the date, because they started filming quite a few months before the show went out on the television. So probably it was about a 7-month process, and they filmed me for about 9 or 10 full days, and they filmed me doing lots of different things. But originally, it wasn't, because a number of people who go on the show, they apply to be on the show. But for me, one of the producers actually found an article that I'd written online and contacted me and thought, oh, Alex would be, he does a lot of raising awareness for autism. And that's what they found. They found an article I'd written on my Asperger's and got in contact with me. And after I'd had a bit of a think, I decided, yeah, I'd love to go on the show. And from there, we filmed loads of different things. All the things that I do in everyday life. So they filmed me in my radio studios, they filmed me at Solihull Moors Football Club, and it was just absolutely fantastic.
Wonderful experience, I'll bet. So what are your plans now for the future?
So my main ambition is to become a TV presenter. So whether that's a children's presenter, I'd absolutely love to be a presenter on something like CBeebies, but also maybe a bit of like a Michael Portillo or a Chris Packham, where I'm presenting sort of documentaries on Asperger's and autism and maybe other things. But also, I present a number of talks on my life living with Asperger's to different businesses and schools and universities. And I'd love to just build that up. So I'm going into a lot more businesses, schools, universities, and actually telling people and sharing my story and raising and helping them to understand autism better and Asperger's and what it's like to live and work with having Asperger's.
That's fantastic, Alex. So if you want to catch up with Alex's amazing story, don't forget to look up his book. That's Not Right, My Life Living with Asperger's. It's on all the Amazons in both print and Kindle.